What's good? Welcome back to another episode of the FinsFocus podcast. This is the first of probably a few free agency episodes, just because I assume we're going to be putting in work post June 1st. We'll obviously have some episodes covering the draft and all that stuff, but free agency just started on Monday, and the Dolphins have made some moves after a slower start on that Monday morning. But we are here with Tyler. How are you doing?
Doing good. I mean, I think if you would have asked me, 20, 30 minutes in a free agency, maybe even a couple hours, and I would have said that I wasn't doing so great. Obviously, Miami lost a bunch of big pieces, or at least a couple really huge pieces. But the way that Chris Greer and company have navigated free agency thus far leaves me with a lot of positive notes. So I'm really excited to talk about those and kind of walk through what we've done and what's to come next.
100%. So I think we'll start off with the biggest fish, and that was Christian Wilkins. He walks, and he is no longer a part of the Miami Dolphins. Now, this isn't that surprising considering the salary cap situation that the Dolphins are in. There was no situation where we were going to be able to pay what the Raiders did, giving him an average annual value of over $27 million. I think it was like $27.5 million. Like, there was just no way we were touching that market. And Christian Wilkins is no longer a Miami Dolphin. And after we released X, I'm pretty sure he was the longest tenure Dolphin up to that point. So it really sucks to see him go. It really sucks to see a draft pick that worked out as well as he did have to leave. But we'll get some compensation in form of a draft pick in return once free agency is over. But with that being said, it just sucks to see him go. But I don't think it's surprising. I don't think there's much more to say that we were never going to be able to re-sign him for that much money.
Yeah, no, that's really it. Wilkins was never a guy that I really expected to bring back unless you were going to try to tag him and then work out some weird, I just never thought the extension could really work. Not only because this year it might have provided you with a little cap flexibility to get it done, but in further years, the same way we're talking about like a Tua extension, you would have had to pay him a lot of money. The cap hit would have been huge. And when you have guys that I think are bigger priorities to re-sign at more important positions like Tua, like Jalen Waddle, like Javon Holland, like Jalen Phillips, who are all coming up really soon, I think it was just, I think at some point you had to let one of them go. And then when you see the value for what Wilkins resigns for, there was no way Miami was going to be able to meet that number.
100%, 100%. So Christian Wilkins, he walks. Another guy who walked, who I wouldn't say I was expecting to come back, but there was just a little part of me who was hoping that maybe there would be a way that we brought him back, was Robert Hunt. But then you see the contract that he got in a similar fashion to Christian Wilkins. You go, oh, okay, never mind. There was never a point where we were going to be able to bring back Robert Hunt for the contract he got for the Panthers. So shout out to the Panthers for trying to protect Bryce Young. I'm sure that they'll love him over there. But unfortunately, that's another draft pick that Chris Greer hit on. But unfortunately, he's going to have to, not be a part of the future, which unfortunately sucks just because a couple years ago, this is one of the fan favorites out of that draft. That's one of the guys who Chris Greer really hit on in that 2020 draft class. And you think this guy could have a really big part of our future. But unfortunately, his market just kind of outgrew what the Dolphins could pay.
Yeah, Robert Hunt, this one hurts because he was one of, if not my favorite player on the team last year, just because of how good he was at guard. I would say of that 2020 draft class, he was probably the biggest hit when it comes to just like where you drafted him being a second round pick and becoming, in my opinion, a pretty nearly elite guard at his, just a nearly
100%.
elite player at his position, at the very least on the edge of being an elite player. And the fact that they couldn't retain him obviously stinks. But then again, same thing with the Christian Wilkins thing. You look at the contracts of guards that were coming in before Robert Hunt signed, and you were like, 16 million here, 17 million here, and you're looking at the Jonah Jacksons of the world signing, and Robert Hunt is just still sitting there, and you're seeing the contracts rolling, and he's not one of them. And then you're like, okay, I have a weird feeling his contract's going to be massive, and then it comes in, and it is, and it's a $20 million average annual value contract, and it was just, as much as I think that he could have been an awesome core part of this team, it's another scenario where you just couldn't fit him under the cap. Obviously, with both of these players, I think the number one thing that Miami can be proud of is the fact that they did draft and develop these players into good guys, and the fact that by losing them, they are going to get compensatory picks in the 2025 draft, most likely. Both of these guys qualify under the formula for third-round picks. So bringing in a mid-round pick for each of these guys when you lost them for essentially nothing is a pretty big deal, especially when Miami's going to have to look for an influx of rookie and young talent over these next couple seasons.
100%. As we look to pay these guys from the 2020-2021 class, you need those guys on rookie deals, which means you need those picks in these drafts, and we need to hit on those picks. But yeah, like you said, once I saw the Kevin Dotson contract, that pretty much was the nail in the coffin for Robert Hunt once that contract came in, because you knew the guard market was exploding. Reports were kind of going around about certain positions were being kind of fiddled out, like running back, safeties, linebackers. They were getting less of the pie. And then you had teams who are now valuing, like, with how valuable offensive linemen are, like interior offensive linemen, they're not being undervalued anymore. They're going to get paid, and their markets were booming. And we saw that with Robert Hunt, and he got paid as he should. And that's kind of where we leave that. So unfortunately, like Tyler said, like could have been a huge part of the team. Super glad he worked out. He was a super fun pick. And again, like you said, position value wise, in terms of being a second round pick, like he was an awesome steal, I would even call it, in that draft. Like he was super fun.
Sure.
But it just sucks
one of the
that
best
he had
32 players from that draft easily.
Oh, 100%. Easily.
He's definitely a first round. You go back and you redraft the 2020 draft, and he is quite easily a first round pick. So just looking at it from like a draft board perspective, he was a steal. I think the Panthers are getting an amazing player. I think the Raiders are getting an amazing player in Christian Wilkins. They're putting together a really fun roster that might not be great right now, but is going to be fun, especially on defense. And yeah, getting back those comp picks is the big thing, and you're going to see Miami probably be stingy because of the fact that they don't want to lose those.
Oh yeah, 100%. Now, this is a guy who, a little bit less kind of there was less feeling when we lost him. And again, this was a guy who I think some people thought we were going to be able to bring him back. I personally never did, just because I thought he just played too well for the contract he was on. Andrew Van Ginkel, he returns, reunites with Brian Flores in Minnesota, and he is now a Minnesota Viking. Honestly, the contract wasn't too expensive, so when you saw that, you go, oh, maybe we could have re-signed him, but he goes, reunites with Brian Flores in Minnesota. And Andrew Van Ginkel, another steal from Chris Greer, who kind of came out of nowhere and was a really productive player at that outside linebacker edge position. And he honestly turned out to be someone who, again, being picked, I think it was like, the 5th or 6th round. He turned out to be a very, very quality player. And shout out to him. He gets paid. He goes to Minnesota. Unfortunately, it sucks to lose him. But we did replace him, and we'll get to that. But yeah, sucks to see Andrew Van Ginkel leave.
Yeah. I mean, he's a great player. Really, really good player in spots. I think he's going to be somebody that has a real chance to outperform their contract, just because of the fact that he's never been given a chance to be a full-time edge. And a big part of that is the fact that he just doesn't meet the size profile. But, now he's going to team up again with Brian Flores, somebody who knows his skill set, knows how to use him, won't be playing him as an off-the-ball linebacker like Vic Fangio was doing for way too long this past season. And he'll probably have some big numbers, especially in spurts, because he's just a really, really good rotational pass rusher. A guy that I really never thought Miami had a chance to retain. And when you look at the kind of guys that an Anthony Weaver defense typically has on the edges, the fact that he isn't necessarily an elite run stopper, somebody who isn't the biggest, I never thought that he was
not really an edge setter. Yeah,
he's not an edge setting type. And I think that so much of what Anthony Weaver likes with those defenses, he likes guys who set hard edges, and he was just never going to be that guy. So I'm definitely, it stings that he's leaving, but it wasn't somebody that I really viewed as a fit. And that's kind of the case with the rest of the guys. I mean, if we gloss over him quickly, Brandon Jones, another guy I never really saw.
Got paid, by the way, too.
And that contract in Denver, good for him.
Love the guy, but yeah. Wow.
Yeah, great guy, good player. I never thought that he would get that kind of money. I just didn't. And I mean, that's way over where I expected, and it ended up, helping Miami because it neutralized some of the comp pick formula for the guys that they signed later on. But yeah, he got a big bag. Raekwon Davis got, honestly, another bigger bag than I expected, but he's an athlete. Guys of that size at defensive tackle are always going to get just huge contracts because you can never have enough
coaches
guys
love the idea of him, man. They love thinking, I can get this guy to become something,
Oh, yeah, no. Raekwon Davis is the ultimate I can fix him player.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, if it all clicks for you, you have like a 2000s era dominant defensive tackle who's like a finesse, like swim move.
Like the most Walmart, like Chris Jones of all time.
Yeah. You are looking at the great value Chris Jones if you do it, if you play your cards right. But he is a really fun player, but that was just never what he was going to be for Miami, especially because he was just he was too heavy for his skill set, but too light to be a true
He's like too
nose.
much of an in-betweener because he's a nose tackle who has like, he's like a pass rusher, like as a nose tackle.
Fast enough to play a 3-tech or something like that where he has to like wash down. Yeah, it just wasn't going to work. Those guys obviously got nice contracts, but again, really only helping with compensatory picks, not something that I was really that concerned about.
100%. So we left it off with Andrew Van Ginkel, and we'll start with his replacement because that's what I was alluding to. Shaq Barrett gets 1 year, up to $9 million, and up to is a key part of that sentence because the base value isn't $9 million. That's, with incentives and all that stuff. And I don't know. I personally haven't seen the contract stuff come out, but you'd assume it's going to be somewhere $4 to $5 million, and then $4 to $5 million of that will be kind of bonuses and stuff to do with statistics, Super Bowl win, stuff like that. But 1 year up to $9 million, very fair, very tidy work from Chris Grier because to me, this is awesome because it really fits with what's kind of going on with our edge room right now. Obviously, you guys know Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb coming off horrific injuries. Jalen Phillips looks great, with his recovery. I wouldn't shock me if he's back by week 1, but it also wouldn't shock me if he's not back by week 1 and he comes back week 1 or 2. But to me, Shaq Barrett's an awesome signing, not only just because I don't think he's that much of a step down, if he is a step down from Andrew Van Ginkel, but to me as an older player who has he has the history of performing, he's a perfect candidate to, fill in that role for those first few games until those two guys come back. And as an older player, his role can then just go and be diminished as those guys come back in, and he can play less snaps, stay fresh, and be pretty effective with less of a role for him.
Yeah, I think if you can get a guy who starts the season similarly like how I couldn't speak there for a minute. Similarly to how a Melvin Ingram started the season for Miami a couple of years ago in 2022, if you can get somebody in Shaq Barrett who starts the season like Melvin Ingram 2 years ago, you got a steal of a player for no matter what the contract really is. I don't think he's going to live up to the incentive amount no matter what it is, just because I don't think he's going to be a major part of the pass rush rotation, especially come November and December. But yeah, early on, you're looking at a veteran who can produce, has proven he can produce, can set edges, and can get after the quarterback. This is not a bad rotational pass rusher at all. I don't think Miami's done in this spot. I think they're probably still looking at guys, might draft the guy later on that they think can produce. But getting somebody who fits that 3-4 outside linebacker mold, similar to like how Jadeveon Clowney was in Baltimore last year and had a really, really good season. I think that the way that Anthony Weaver likes to blitz and likes to send these sim pressures, Shaq Barrett is somebody who could far outperform, like his numbers could far outperform his actual production when it comes to just the fact that he could have a lot of lanes freed up for him with these kind of blitzes, sim pressures, especially if Miami keeps beefing up on the interior at linebacker with a big nickel type safety, etc.
Oh, it's super exciting. I just think like when you start, obviously he'll be playing a lot more, like I said, with Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips expecting to miss time. But then he can kind of go and fall back into a DPR, designated pass rushing role, where all he needs to do is get to the quarterback, which is, his run, like his ability to stop the run has definitely diminished as he's gotten older. But man, he can still rush the passer. He can still get pressure. That's something that he could still do last year. And the fact that that could be his role as those guys come back and filter back in, and he can kind of let his role decrease and just, only rush the passer. Like to me, that's a perfect signing, and it's a good fit with, where that position room is. So that was an awesome signing for me. So shout out to him. He obviously stays, in Florida, coming from Tampa Bay. And to me, honestly, it was really just tidy work from Chris Grier because it's not too expensive. It's not too much of a risk. You're not giving this guy multiple years as a veteran. And it's a perfect bridge player to kind of get you through that first part of the season.
Yeah. And I think that one thing that we should just add on here at the end is that is another player who does not factor into the compensatory pick formula because he was released by Tampa Bay. So he doesn't hear about, we don't have to hear about like how does this affect, like does Miami lose picks? They won't be losing picks on these players, and that's kind of a common thread you're going to see with some of these later signings is that they're not going to lose Miami future draft capital, which is clearly a focus of what Chris Grier is doing.
Clearly a focus and clearly very important for us as we continue to try and build out this team and build out this roster. Moving on to what I would say is the second most important signing, the most important signing, but we're talking about second here. We bring in Jordan Brooks, linebacker from Seattle, and it is an awesome signing. 3 years, $30 million. Like, that's an awesome contract in the first place, especially considering what Patrick Queen got from the Steelers. But then also considering the player that he is such a perfect fit for this Weaver defense. Now, coming from the Fangio defense, you needed a guy more like Jerome Baker, who's athletic and play in space, can kind of run with the receivers a little bit, play better in coverage. In this Weaver scheme, coming from Baltimore, you need guys who can get downhill and be violent and be run stoppers and be tacklers. You want guys who are willing tacklers, who want to be physical and are going to be good going downhill. They don't need to be as strong or as good in coverage. Obviously, you still need them to be decent, which Jordan Brooks is fine in coverage. He's not horrible or anything like that. But man, he loves going downhill, and he loves bringing contact and being physical. And that's going to fit so perfectly in this Weaver defense. I'm so excited to see him and David Long Jr. do similar things, because even though they play a little bit differently, their core kind of similarities are they're super fast getting downhill and they love to hit. And that's going to be so fun to watch, seeing what Anthony Weaver can do with both of those guys.
I think the difference between signing a Patrick Queen at, $13-14 million a year and signing a Jordan Brooks at $10 million a year is that Patrick Queen was signed for what his ceiling can be. Patrick Queen was signed to the Steelers because at his best, they believe he can be a Mike and he can be a really good one. And that's what that $13-14 million price tag comes out to. Is that like, hey, we think you can be a really good Mike. You're a really good Will right now. We'll see what happens. Miami signed Jordan Brooks with the intention of, they signed him at his Will value. Like, at the fact that as a weak side linebacker, he is a $10 million-ish guy. And honestly, I think he's probably worth even more than that, just because I think that he had a lot of tough assignments on him in Seattle. But they did not sign him for what his ceiling can be. And I think this could be one of the biggest risers on this defense, because I think that there's a real chance that he plays the Mike linebacker spot. And you see him do a lot of the stuff that you saw a Roquan Smith do last year for the Ravens, or you see a Fred Warner kind of do, or a lot of these really good linebackers who have crazy mobility. I know that a lot of people are trying to figure out where Jordan Brooks lines up on a lot of this stuff. He is a really good pass coverage linebacker. I know that that's going to be a hot take right now, especially because I know the PFF grades are low, and I know that there's people who are saying he gets targeted a lot, but it's because of how much he gets there, because of how much pressure is put on him from that position. There are times where he's going to get beat, but overall, he's a stellar player. Seattle had him in these robot looks so often, where your goal as in that look is essentially you have to play everything, because you go down and you scrape against the run to see if the run's coming to your side. And if it doesn't, you have to react to the play fake, turn around, put your head backwards, facing towards the receiver away from the quarterback, and go stop a crosser coming over the middle of the field. And that's the kind of stuff Miami could not do at all last year. They could not stop crossers. All these teams were repetitively just running these same routes that were coming over the middle, and Miami could do nothing about it underneath and deeper. And Jordan Brooks it just absolutely excels in that role and locks people down, like receivers coming over the middle. He's an athletic freak who has really good technique, and Seattle just breeds these guys down there. And now you're looking at a guy who didn't have to play Mike linebacker for a majority of his career, but if they put him in that role and they say, hey, you're going to be the number one linebacker, I think you could see both him and David Long play way above their contract value this season.
Oh, 100%. I also think we'll see a bunch of nickel too. We'll see a bunch of the 3-4. So whether it's 4-2-5 or whether you're playing in that 3-4, I think both those guys are going to be on the field a lot. Obviously, we saw David Long be taken off the field in nickel situations last year. I don't think that's going to be the case this year, just because Weaver just has a complete different philosophy in what he wants from his linebackers and what he wants from linebacker play. And I'm just so excited to see what these two guys can do in that scheme.
Yeah, just the range on Jordan Brooks, I think, just has the potential to unlock so much of this defense that was lacking last year, because I think the fact that they're already going to be so much more of an attacking defense is going to automatically help with the run, even though, you lose a Christian Wilkins and you might not have your best edges, but the fact that they have linebackers who can fly downhill and make these plays, and they don't have to put, Andrew Van Ginkel and David Long on the field in run situations as off-ball linebackers. They can go to a Jordan Brooks who can do both. They can go to a We're going to mention later Jordan Poyer as a safety, Javon Holland as safeties who can do both. Versatility is such a big thing, and I think the ceiling on a Jordan Brooks type of player in an expanded role, which I really think he's going to get, is phenomenal. And I just think you're getting a player that has the potential to be a budget Fred Warner or a budget Roquan Smith. And at $10 million, and the fact that all these best teams have linebackers that you're afraid of, like the Chiefs have Nick Bolton, who's played phenomenal. The 49ers have Fred Warner, like I said, Roquan Smith. All these best teams have linebackers that you don't want to throw near and you don't want to run at. And if Jordan Brooks can be that guy in Miami, I think you're looking at increasing the ceiling of this Dolphins defense tenfold.
And by the way, I'm not disagreeing with you. When he says bubble Fred Warner, that could be a top 10 linebacker in the league because Fred Warner obviously is the best of the best. Jordan Brooks has a really good opportunity here to really break out as a linebacker because obviously I feel like a lot of people know he's really solid. He has a chance to become like a household name at that linebacker position if he can kind of, fill out that role and again, play that Roquan Smith role coming from Baltimore. So that's going to be super fun. Really quickly, while we're on the topic of inside linebacker, obviously Jordan Brooks helps round out that room. You have Channing Tindall and David Long Jr. there as well. And we also did sign Anthony Walker Jr. from the Cleveland Browns. He'll just be a depth piece. He struggles to stay healthy. When he is, he's fine. But really just a depth piece there, but I figured we'd mention his name. I don't know if you have anything more to say about him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much on him, to be honest. It's not a guy I've watched much tape on. I know he's not a bad tackler, a guy who can make plays against the run. But again, I mean, I think he hasn't played many games in the last 2 seasons.
Oh, he's just super injury prone, but Chris Greer loves that, so.
Yeah, and I mean, if you happen to get a guy who plays above his pay grade and, stays healthy, then go for it. I think it's a good move that they went out and got somebody who might have a higher ceiling. And I think that that's kind of what you have to do. I know people are going to be like, yeah, like you said, the Chris Greer injury prone thing, but those are the kind of guys you kind of have to hit on right now because of the fact that you can't afford to go spend $20 million on proven commodities. You kind of have to hit on these guys like a Jordan Brooks who you might have to give a bigger role to who's never played in that role, or a guy like an Anthony Walker who hasn't been healthy, but when healthy is a solid football player, or the next guy we'll probably bring up in Jordan Poyer who is getting older and might.
Let's get to Jordan Poyer then. Let's get to it.
Let's do it.
I just want to start here. 1 year, that's fine. He's old. $2 million.
He'll be 33, I think, by the end of the season. But $2 million is.
That is like when we first signed him, the money hadn't come out. So I go, oh, this is really good, regardless. Then the money comes out, the structure of the deal comes out. 1 year, $2 million for a guy who, listen, I still think we're going to add another body to the room. Who that body is, we don't really know yet. I would personally just bring back Deshaun Elliott, and then you have Jordan Poyer as your third safety. But even if Jordan Poyer is your safety opposite Javon Holland, that's not even a bad sign just because he wasn't that bad. He was pretty good last year. Let me not even say it wasn't that bad. He was very, very solid last year, and he was playing a bunch of different roles. Once Matt Milano kind of got injured, he was coming into the box way more. He played kind of that slot nickel role way more just because they had to get him more closer to the box. So he was kind of playing out of his comfort zone. But Jordan Poyer, if he's the main safety opposite Javon Holland, that's great. That's fine. But in a perfect world, he's probably your third safety at 1 year, $2 million. And that's an awesome steal of a contract for Chris Greer.
Yeah, I love this move. I think that, like you said, I think a big thing about signing Jordan Poyer is the fact that we got to see him in multiple roles last season. I mean, for the longest time, him and Micah Hyde were the most vanilla 2-high safety group in the league. Just like they played their 2-high shell, not
every
much
time.
rotation, and they were just going to fly to everything that moved and go make plays on the football and, cap defenses deep. But when they had injuries and the fact that they had a defensive play caller change last year, the Bills got a lot less vanilla and they changed up a lot of stuff. So that meant seeing Jordan Poyer more play in the box and go out and just hit people and make plays on the football, not necessarily just on deep downfield throws, but on stuff that was underneath. And I think that that's a perfect role for what he could do down here, is just having a guy who can go make plays, make big tackles, and a guy who can be a ball hawk when need be. I think Jordan Poyer's a really good football player. I think having him as a traditional 2-eye safety is probably where I want him the most. But if you have to play him down in the box a little bit, I'm fine with that. I think the thing with this Jordan Poyer move is obviously you brought up the money, and $2 million, absolutely a phenomenal deal. But I don't think we know where any of these safeties are going to play until we figure out who the third safety is. Is Jordan Poyer the box big nickel guy? No clue. Is Javon Holland the box big nickel guy? We've talked about it before. No idea. Is it a third guy? We don't know. But there's going to be a third guy brought in because this team and Anthony Weaver's defense last year with the Ravens, those guys love big nickel. And they turned Kyle Hamilton into one of the best defensive players in football out of that big nickel. So who that third guy is going to be huge when it comes to deciding and figuring out how Miami is going to utilize all this different personnel.
Oh, they love those three safety looks. They had Marcus Williams, Geno Stone, and Kyle Hamilton on the field a lot together. They love that big nickel look. And again, personally, there's still a bunch of good free agent safeties out there. It was a great free agent safety class. Obviously, the leader of the clubhouse, Justin Simmons, I think he's priced himself out of Miami personally. But
I think he's priced himself out, if I'm being completely honest, Justin Simmons, of a lot of jobs just because there's so much talent on the safety market right now that I have no clue where he's going to go.
Who has the money to pay him right now?
I know I heard Tennessee rumors. They just shelled out a bunch of money to Calvin Ridley, so I don't know, how much money they still have left. But I've heard Tennessee's been in on everybody. They've been in on him, Snead. There's rumors coming out that the Titans are in on everybody, but who knows where Justin Simmons could end up. I mean, if I'm Miami, I'm making a call, but he, like you said, probably priced out. We'll see. I think that's the big domino to fall, probably still remaining in free agency, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, and I think once he signs, you'll see a lot more of the other safeties kind of fall right behind. You'll probably see a run of safeties go. Again, like I've said, I'm a proponent. Just bring back Deshaun Elliott. There's your three safeties. Roll from there, and that's a great safety room to have. Maybe you add a fourth body in the draft, or you add a fourth guy in free agency. But that's me. That would be what I would do. Do you have a name in mind or anything that you would add to the safety room?
If we're going to kind of get into what the next moves should be, at least, I mean, I think that we should probably, we got to cover, there's a couple offensive names. But if I'm going to bring up, if we're going to talk about what I think the next,
Well, yeah, we'll stick to the defense, then we'll get to the offense, I think.
Yeah. If we're going to talk about what I think the next moves on defense should be, I do think that a third safety is the number one move. I think that bringing in another safety or bringing back another safety in Deshaun Elliott is something that it has to happen. Because, like I said, big nickel, there's going to be a lot of three safety looks on the field. Guys who can trigger against the run and make plays against the pass. You need those kind of guys. I think that if Miami brings back a Deshaun Elliott type, I think that you're looking at that big nickel role being a rotation where you see a Jordan Poyer down there, you see a Javon Holland down there, you see a Deshaun Elliott down there, because I think all three of those guys are kind of tweeners at the safety position where neither of them are true center fielders, but none of them are true box safeties either. So they kind of are traditional two-high guys. Yeah, they're very multiple, which I think is awesome. I think that there is a world where you bring back Deshaun Elliott and that role changes weekly, whether it's Elliott, Poyer, Holland. I think Jalen Ramsey could probably get some dirty work against condensed formations as like a safety type. I think that's the one big thing nobody's talking about is I think Jalen Ramsey wants to play some safety. He said that he was a DB and not a corner last year. I think that there's a real world where Jalen Ramsey plays some big nickel and Miami is looking at, playing Cam Smith and who else on the outside. But still, I think there's a role where Ramsey plays in there. But I think if you bring back Elliott, I think it's a rotation. But I think if Miami brings in a different name, let's just say, a guy that I've been kind of campaigning for a little bit is a Jamal Adams type. I think that's a guy that you could say have a designated role where he's in the box and the job is just get after the quarterback and go hit people. Like, go scrape against the run, go play against the quarterback, and just go pursue, because that's kind of what they've already looked for in these linebackers. You've got a David Long type, you've got Jordan Brooks, and these guys are very instinctual, very smart football players who know when a run is coming and know how to read run plays. And then if you can somehow add like a Jamal Adams to that mix, you might not need to go out and fill out this defensive tackle room and be like a run-stuffing DT type group, because you have linebackers and safeties on the second level who can go out and hit people. So I think Adams is kind of my pipe dream scenario, but I think Deshaun Elliott's more realistic, allows you to be really multiple. And then, from then on, it's bringing in probably other pieces on the defensive line, cornerback room, etc.
I have one thing to say about that. Yikes. If you know, you know. I will add, Nick Needham also was brought back. He's a cornerback safety kind of hybrid. He's usually playing nickel corner, but we've always heard like, oh, he's learning. He's in the safety room. He's like learning about that. So figured we'd mention that. We'll see what role he has to play. Honestly, I don't expect to see a lot of him on the field, but figured I'd note him coming back.
Trill Williams.
Yeah, Trill Williams. Bring him back. Hey, I liked him. I don't know where he's at right now, but shout out to him.
Yeah.
Moving on. We did, I guess we'll just finish up the defense here. We brought in a cornerback special teamer, Saron Neal from the Bills. Everyone's excited. Really good special teamer. Super cool. Super sick. Awesome. We also brought in a defensive lineman from the Cowboys, Neville Gallimore. Just D-line depth, which we had none of. So it's nice to have at least a body there.
Yeah, they needed that. I think the Saron Neal thing is interesting because Miami has made it very clear with these signings over the last couple seasons that they don't feel like Danny Crossman is at fault at all for the special teams woes, and they feel like it is 100% a personnel issue. And they've gone out of their way to ensure every year that they're bringing in special teamers. Last year,
Elijah Campbell was brought back too.
Elijah Campbell was brought back. Last year, they went out and got Braxton Berrios for the return game. They changed out punters because of the Jason Sanders thing. Now they have Jake Bailey. They brought Jake Bailey back, so they clearly don't think he was as much of an issue.
Somehow.
Yeah. I mean, they clearly feel like they need better gunners and guys who can go make plays on special teams. And if that ends up being what's the game changer for them, then sure, I think Neal, Campbell, you already have a couple guys who are special teams aces. Justin Bethel still on the roster too?
I think he's a free agent, but I assume he's a camp body at a minimum. But I can check
we'll
that
see if he
quick.
comes back. That's another good special teamer. I think just having this many guys, you can never be mad about it. Gallimore, like you said, just more depth on the interior. Really excited to have that.
Just we didn't have anyone there. We literally did not have a player there. And I think Justin Bethel still is under contract. Or no, 2024 he's not. So he's a UFA right now, but I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if we brought him back.
Yeah, I don't know where else he would be. And, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not
to be honest, this is just a good time for me to say how Danny Crossman is still here. Fascinated. Completely shocked by, to be honest. But he is. And like you said, clearly they don't think it's his fault. So I guess we're just going to have to trust Mike McDaniel and thinking that it probably isn't. But personally, it's been too many years of, mediocre to bad special teams play. But it is what it is. Moving to the offensive side of the ball, unless I miss anything on the defense side of the ball, I think we've hit everything, even the depth guys. Let's move to the offense. We'll start with Jonnu Smith, just because he was the first signing of free agency, and I don't think we've talked about that yet. But a really tidy deal from Chris Greer. 2 years, $10 million is really 2 years, $8 million, $4.5 million per year, something like that. And to be honest, I love this move. Over the last 3 years, he's led tight ends in YAC. He can also block from that H-back position, just a super scheme fit. I think Mike McDaniel is going to have a lot of fun with him. And he can, before the offseason started, everyone was talking about how we need a wide receiver 3 or a tight end who can kind of fill that role, being a big body over the middle. And Jonnu Smith can do that. He can have that YAC. He can be a YAC guy. He can be a big body over the middle. And he can really round out that tight end room of Durham Smythe and Julian Hill. With a legitimate passing threat really nicely. Just really tidy work from Chris Greer.
Yeah, I love this signing. I have to say it. I love this signing. The Miami Dolphins were never going to be a team that had an elite tight end, but getting a guy who can be an option over the middle, can be really good at just eating up space, especially in the flats. Miami likes throwing those routes out to the flats. In year 1, it was a Mike Gesicki thing. In year 2, it was a running back thing and getting the screen game involved. But I think that they want to be able to, send guys like Tyreek and Waddle down the field and have somebody underneath who can just kind of eat up yards on top of the fact that they already have all these speedy playmakers. So just adding a guy who's really fluid in space, really good at taking flats and turning them into 5, 10, 15, 20-yard gains. I think that Jonnu Smith's an amazing signing. Obviously a decent blocker, like you said, an H-back type. I wonder if Miami's going to, give him some reps where he plays outside, isolated, more so as a receiver.
Big slot,
because
yeah.
In year one, they did. Wow. In year 1, they did so much where it was, Alec Ingold or Raheem Mostert or
Trent Sherfield,
Mike Gesicki or Trent Sherfield on the outside, all the way on the outside, playing this role where they would either get matched up on a linebacker Or Miami could see if it was zone. If they got matched up on a corner, they'd have a guy like Jalen Waddle or Tyreek on the inside, and all of a sudden you have a linebacker mismatch for one of your best playmakers. I remember it specifically on that big stick nod play Waddle had against Baltimore where you burned Patrick Queen. Like, there were big plays that would happen because of the fact that Miami can manipulate personnel, and Jonnu being a guy that can kind of play everywhere and can make big catches. I would love to see them line him up absolutely everywhere and continue what they've been doing, where you see Tyreek or Waddle in the slot or in the backfield. And it's just one more piece that you have to keep track of. And we already know that there's probably not a better coach in the league when it comes to manipulating where he puts his guys, maybe besides Kyle Shanahan, than Mike McDaniel.
And the more we talk about it, the more I think about it. Jonnu Smith, like I've said, it's just a super scheme fit. And again, I was watching the tape. This guy was getting screens last year. Now, listen, I don't know if that's the best way to use him, and I don't know if I want to see many more screens after that Chiefs game last year, but he can take screens and kind of, again, like I said, like over the last 3 years, leads tight ends in yak. So, like, again, just a great scheme fit and a guy who will definitely have a role in this offense. And again, fills two needs at once, being that big receiver 3 over the middle. Obviously, wide receiver 3 is still in need, but being a big threat over the middle and being a guy who could, like we said, rounds out that tight end room nicely with a legitimate threat to catch the ball from that spot. So really nice to see Jonnu Smith as an option in the tight end room. Speaking of blocking, with Connor Williams yet to be re-signed, obviously a lot of reports saying he's not even going to look to re-sign or meet with teams until June 1st. We got ourselves a guard and a center, but at his size, you'd assume he's a center. Aaron Brewer from the Titans, 3 years, $21 million, $7 million, so not too expensive, but enough money to say he's going to be starting for this offensive line.
Yeah, I think he's probably the starting center. I think that Miami likes their big guards. They're big, like athletic type guards. Like they had Robert Hunt, who
the Maulers,
was a huge piece of it. Isaiah Wynn was a tackle, moved inside to guard. Like they like those guys who are huge at guard, and then they want a center who can just fire to the second level and make blocks that, don't have to be 100% effective, but just if you can get hands on somebody who's super far
just get in
away,
their way. Yeah,
you create just absolutely massive plays. And that was a lot of what Connor Williams did. It wasn't necessarily him mauling and running guys over. It was him snapping the ball and running to the secondary and just laying a hit on a linebacker when nobody else in the league can really do that. And I think that that's kind of what you're going to see Brewer do, is just kind of be a guy who can snap the ball, be really explosive, get to the second level, and maybe turn a guy inside out. And then you have more of those big plays. I think this is a very much like a big play hunting thing, and especially in the run game. But if you want to talk about him from a pass game perspective, I know that his pass game metrics aren't the best, but like I said, you can pair him up with, Teron Armstead and Austin Jackson as his tackles, and then two bigger guards. Miami already gets the ball out pretty fast. Center is probably the least of the worrisome positions when it comes to like getting pressure like directly up the middle. So as long as he can be serviceable, Miami's going to try to move pockets around a lot where they're going to have, Tua snap the ball and kind of boot out, then stop and throw it, or a lot of those just like weird functioning pockets where they slide the entire line to one side. Like there isn't a lot where Miami does a lot of traditional drop back passing anyway. So I don't think the pass protection will be a really huge concern. Obviously that's not his strong suit. I think that he could be a really good run blocker, though, in this offense.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So when he was initially signed, there was a lot of talk in the Dolphins space about how he's 6'1", 295, definitely a smaller player. That's why, again, you kind of have to slot him in at center. He could play guard, and obviously you've seen smart guards, play well. But again, at that size, you'd assume he's a center, and that's where I think he's been his best anyways. 6'1", 295, but he's super fast, super explosive because of that smaller size. So he's really good at in the run game, really good at getting to the second level. Very similar to Austin Jackson, where it's like when you get him out in space and get him moving, it's really fun to watch him go out and find some blocks. So that's really fun. Like you said, he definitely has his struggle in pass protection, but there's two things I would say about that. One, we get the ball out quicker than anyone, so that should be less of an issue. And number two, with Butch, Barry, Frank Smith, Mike McDaniel, you basically have 4 offensive line coaches on the team. I think you'd be all right. And I think they're thinking he's still relatively young, still developing. I think that, Mike McDaniel likes him and thinks he can probably teach him and develop him a little bit. And I think that means something. The fact that Mike McDaniel clearly said, like, let's go out and get this guy, he clearly sees something in him, and that's super important to me. And the fact that I think with Butch Barry developing him, I really think that, his floor already of what he's shown on tape can really be kind of really promoted here, and he could really progress in this scheme just because his traits that work really well fit so perfectly with the run game in this offense. And like I said before, he has struggled in pass pro because of his smaller size against specifically the bigger maulers because he gets overpowered because he's so small. I think because we get the ball out so quickly, like he can really fit and be a guy who can be a really solid starting center. And at $7 million, that'd be awesome to get him at that cap hit. So I'm a pretty big fan of that.
I really like the move, honestly. I think that just Miami does. I think what they did a lot of this offseason when you just getting guys who can play above their pay grade potentially, like a Shaq Barrett, who, it might be getting paid, $9 million at the max, but it probably won't be there. Jordan Poyer getting paid $2 million. If he starts the whole season and is bad, he's worth more than $2 million. If Jordan Brooks plays what we think he could play, he's worth more than $10 million. And then Brewer, I think that you're looking at a guy as a starting center, $7 million a year. That's chump change, really. And then when you take into account that that's a player who really wasn't in a great system for what he was good at and is going to be, a stronger player and somebody who can really make plays as a mauler in a outside zone scheme and a scheme where he has to do a lot of movement, I think he can be a really great player. And Brandon Thorne, who's probably the biggest offensive line influence on Twitter, is a big fan, which obviously was a big endorsement for me. I haven't watched as much of the tape. I've done a little highlight digging and kind of just seeing what he does well, but I think just getting somebody who's that hyper athletic and can make those kind of plays and get to the second level, and with how much Miami loves messing with their protections and snapping the ball, and even if it's a pass protection play, jetting Connor Williams out to go block an edge, or, having a pulling play with the center where it's pin pull or something and the center's pulling out to the outside, or, running those screen plays that they ran last year to Devon Achane where he'd do the little Texas route screen. There are so many different scenarios where having a guy who's just extremely fast and can get off the ball when need be, and you don't have to bet on an ineligible man downfield penalty or something where, this is a guy who can, when he knows he has to trigger, can trigger downfield fast and go make plays. That, I think, is a huge part of this offense. And if he can just, get the timing down with Tua, if we know how the timing of this offense is going to work, is it going to be more traditional drop back than we had last year? Those are obviously a lot of questions, but just as a, right away, the center and the talent of the player, I really like the signing.
Oh, on paper, it's such a fantastic fit for the team and for him as a player. Like we said, again, smaller but super explosive. We can limit how, not bad, but we can limit how his pass protection is in strong suit with the way we play, and then we can let him go do what he's good at and go be a run blocker. I just think it's a perfect fit, and I think that's why we gave him this contract and gave him 3 years, which again, like you said, we've been pretty safe, dude. Giving this guy 3 years, that's a way bigger risk than giving a guy like Shaq Barrett 1 year. I think it's going to work out, so I don't think it's that much of a risk, but that is something where it's okay, you're on the hook for him for at least 2 years, most likely, because you think he's going to be really good. And like you said, with getting more out of these contracts, Jonnu Smith, just another example of, dude, he's getting $4.5 million per year. I could really see him having a big year. If he had 500 yards, would you be surprised? I personally wouldn't be. I think he could have more than 500 yards.
I think that he had his best year statistically last year in Atlanta, Jonnu Smith did, and that was behind Kyle Pitts and in an offense where a lot of his work was coming off of screens and, little dumped off passes, and he still had his best production year. Now he's going to be likely the number 1 pass option tight end on a team and potentially the number 3 receiver on a team. So I don't think 500, 600 yards. I don't think something like that's out of the question. Do I think he's going to get 800 to 1,000 as a third option? No. I don't even think that that's possible no matter who you threw in here alongside Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. But getting someone who can just be a solid third option, get you 400, 500, 600 yards, that could be a really big piece and somebody that teams have to look at when they study you now in a way that they didn't have to look at Durham Smythe or Julian Hill.
100%. With that being said, I think that's all the free agent signings. We also brought back Robert Jones. We might as well mention that. Really nice backup guard, swing guard, whatever you want to call him. I think that's perfect. Yeah. We also brought back Salvin Ahmed, which a lot of people on Twitter, funnily enough, were getting angry about. I just think he's good to me. He's good depth. I like him. I'm personally a Salvin Ahmed guy. I think he'll get maybe a couple snaps a game and he'll do something with them. honestly, he's clearly just there because McDaniel sees a fit there. But again, just good depth. Other than that, I think this is a perfect time to kind of get to what the needs still are post this first initial group of free agency. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that we're off to a good start. I think that when you were going to lose players like that, Miami may have lost the best. They may have lost better players than what they've brought in thus far, like just from a top-end talent perspective. But when you take into account that losing Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt, which is a combined like $50 million in cap space, and they've brought in, I don't know, 7 or 8 guys who can be contributors, and all of those are like combined like $36 million. I think that that's a win-win, and when you already have the top-end talent like Miami does in guys like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Jalen Ramsey, Jalen Phillips, like these guys are your cornerstones, you can afford to lose some good pieces and then just kind of fill out a roster. So you're not looking as much at like a stars and scrubs type unit that, the Jalen Ramseys and the Tyreek Hills of the world play really well. But when it comes time to play playoff games, you need big games from the Jordan Poyers of the world and the Jordan Brookses of the world and the David Long Juniors of the world. And like all these guys who might not be superstars, but you can't have them be bad because the best teams in the league know how to exploit your
You
worst
can't have
pieces.
Malik Reed be your best player on defense in a playoff game. Like that just can't happen again. And that was the case last year.
Yeah, you just can't go into playoff games and expect teams to just throw at your best players. Like you're only as good as your weakest link in the NFL. And that's 100%. Why teams like the Chiefs play so well, is because they not only disguise their weakest links amazingly, but they turn them into solid players. Like you can't name 4 receivers on the Kansas City Chiefs, but you know that they all made big catches in the Super Bowl. Like Justin Watson is there making plays, and he's like their 4th or 5th best receiver. Noah Gray's out there making plays as a backup tight end, and all the players on defense. There aren't that many superstars. Chris Jones, Bolton, Trent McDuffie, but you don't know like the Deion Bushes of the world and all these guys, the Willie Gays of the world, who are all making these plays. This is the kind of stuff Miami has to do to make this team a contender. I understand they're not bringing in the top end talent like they did the last 2 seasons, but they're not done yet. They've got a lot more money coming in. Potential Tyreek restructure. Xavier Howard money comes in June 1st. This team's not done. There's going to be a lot more quantity of players coming in, and maybe a quality player or 2, depending on what they do.
100%. There's still some cut candidates like Jeff Wilson. You could cut Mike White if you wanted to. Liam Eichenberg. I'm just listing off some guys who, honestly, I would expect 2 of those 3 to be back, but just some options there if you want to clear some cap space. The one thing I want to get into is what the needs are still going forward. Quarterback, obviously, you're good. In the running back room, if you wanted to add a bigger body, I'd understand. Personally, I think you're good to roll with Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane. Was that per Tyler DeSena, or who is that?
It was per ML Football saying that NFL Network's reporting it. I'm not saying it's legit only because I don't trust ML Football, okay? I'm adding you right now. That account is dumb. But the if NFL Network's reporting it and there's a little J.K. Dobbins interest, I don't hate it on a low-risk contract.
100%.
But running back, like you said, that room's pretty much filled out. I don't think you're going to see much change.
Exactly. I will say, even though you add Jonnu Smith, who can, again, play that big slot role, can be the wide receiver 3 option. But behind Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, I still think you need to bring back a wide receiver 3. If you want to bring back Braxton Berrios, I would be very happy with that. I'm sure they'll bring back River Craycraft as a guy to be your 5th receiver or something like that. But right now, the room is Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Eric Ezukama, along with all the practice squad guys you brought back. So you definitely need to fill out that room a little bit. The tight end room, I think, is perfect. Sorry, go ahead.
The receiver room, I think, needs a 3.
100%.
I don't think they've had a 3. I understand Jonnu Smith can be a wide receiver 3 in this kind of offense. I think that you should be better safe than sorry, especially when Tyreek Hill's running only 60% of your routes as a team. Unless there's a comprehensive plan to keep Tyreek Hill on the field for 17 games and have him, still catch a crazy number of passes, but also be on the field more. I don't know if that's less motion or what it is. Unless there's a comprehensive plan, this team should be looking at wide receiver 3s. Michael Thomas. I'm just saying, Michael Thomas, if he's an option, that would be my guy.
Speaking of New Orleans, I mean, Jarvis Landry was. I'm just saying. No, I'm obviously joking. It'd be fun.
Bring back Juice and Odell Beckham. Call him
and Michael Thomas. Just bring back the boys.
Yeah, but like even if you want to bring in the LSU duo, bring back Jarvis, bring in Odell. Call it an off season. That'd be fun. I mean, but like seriously, this
Listen,
team
if we're not going to win playoff games, let's have fun. That's what I say. We might as well have some fun while we're doing it.
Yeah, and I think that this team needs a number 3, preferably someone who can play a big slot role. That's why I've said Michael Thomas. But yeah, receiver room, obviously the top end's done. Like that's
Bring
good.
back Trent Sherfield. He's available.
Yeah, he's
Bring
available.
him home.
There are so many options for cheap, and I just want to see Miami get a guy who fills out a body type that they don't have. Just get a guy who can block in the run game like a Trent Sherfield did for you, like Jarvis Landry can do. Like, get a big slot type guy who can make tough catches over the middle and block somebody, and I think that your receiver room looks 10 times better than it did last season.
100%. I agree with you, by the way. I was just saying I think the need is a little bit diminished with bringing in Jonnu Smith, but the need is still there. I just think it's less of a need, if that makes sense. Fullback, obviously, you're good. The tight end room, as we said, is filled out now. You have Durham Smythe, Jonnu Smith, Julian Hill. You can have your developmental guy and developmental type in Tanner Connor. On the offensive line, obviously, you have Tron Armstead and Austin Jackson. You have Keon Smith as a backup there and Ryan Hayes. Obviously, we might bring in a tackle to replace Tron Armstead in the future, but getting some guards is going to be super important because as of right now, it's Robert Jones and Lester Cotton, and Chasen Hines, I think, is still on the team. So you need to bring in a guard. I think we should just bring back Isaiah Wynn, or there's guys like Laken Tomlinson who has played in the scheme before. Whoever it is, I don't mind. Maybe you attack it in the draft, but interior offensive line still a big need because right now we don't have a guard.
Yeah, I think the guard's a huge thing, huge need. We don't have a single one who's like a real starting caliber guy. I think Isaiah Wynn can be that guy, especially if he's like the 4th or 5th best player on your offensive line. That's fine. I would personally bring him back in a heartbeat. I think that Miami, like you said, could probably use a swing tackle of some kind, and there's also other guards available like a Laken Tomlinson. But I think that going out and seeing Miami sign a veteran guard or two, and then probably draft the tackle on day 2 or day 3 early, just to see a guy who could potentially sit underneath Austin Jackson, Teron Armstead, and just fill a role when there's either an injury or Teron Armstead inevitably retires. I think that that's not a bad idea at all. I think that seeing Miami just go out and get some depth would be huge.
I agree 100%. Moving to the defense, defensive line, still a major need there. Obviously, you got to replace Christian Wilkins, and you need a nose tackle. I'm expecting to do that in the draft just because Anthony Weaver has a history of developing that, but just going through it, that's definitely a need. You probably want to bring in one more edge rusher, even if not Shaq Barrett. Being there is huge. Obviously, you have JP and Bradley Chubb coming back. The inside linebacker room is looking pretty good, though. I think, honestly, you're probably filled out there for the most part. I don't even think you need to address that in the draft. You have your younger guys. You have your starters. You have your backups in Duke Riley, Anthony Walker, guys like that. Although I will say, personally, I would cut Duke Riley. Like, we're talking about how you want to be good getting downhill, good tacklers. Like, listen, I love that Duke Riley's active on Twitter, which makes a lot of people like him, but when I see him missing tackles and not putting in the effort in the playoff games, like that makes me not want to see him on the team. So that would be another cut candidate for me. And then going back, you have, obviously we've already talked about the need for a 3rd and 4th safety. And then you're looking at a potential outside corner to play opposite Jalen Ramsey if you don't think Cam Smith can do that. Where are you, by the way, with the Cam Smith as CB2, out of curiosity?
I think that there's a good player in there somewhere. I think that he is going to take a step, and I think that there's a real chance that he does crack a rotation just because I think he was way too technically refined coming out of the draft to be as underplayed as he was. And
his instincts were too good to not have him out there.
His instincts were too good, and his technique was really solid. And that's a big, like, I thought that he was a rookie that would really be in favor with Vic Fangio, and I was wrong. And, he didn't play much of the season. And I know that he bites on the occasional double move, but that's something you can teach some of that out of a guy. You can.
Exactly.
Like, I think if your worst trait as a corner is that you're going to get burnt every so often trying to get a pick six, I think that
happens anyways. It happens anyway, so why not play him?
Yeah, I think that he was a guy who probably should have got playing time. I still would go out and just get somebody for competition. I think that, even if it is like, not Eli Apple coming back.
But the idea of Eli Apple, I get what you're saying.
The idea of Eli Apple, like, I don't even think, I'm going to be real, I don't think he was that awful last season. I think that he was not.
I don't know.
Top.
I think at the same early time, in the season, I think he started off like being like, oh, okay, he's not actually that bad. He can fill a role here. As it got to the end of the season, he started getting torched a little bit.
Yeah, I think that but like the idea of an Eli Apple or somebody like that, I think that there's enough corner depth where you could find somebody. I kind of liked like a Ronald Darby type. He's no longer available, but I think that Miami could go look to bring somebody in. You never know. Maybe like not just Cam Smith. Like, who knows if Kader Kohu is better off in this kind of a scheme? Like, I think that there's still a role for Kader Kohu on this football team as a real player. And I think that he's a guy that nobody's really looking at as somebody who could play significant snaps. I don't think that he is the full-time outside corner, but definitely not a bad rotational piece. It's just the fact that he was being put out on an island against CeeDee Lamb every game and Stephon Diggs as a number 2 corner.
Yeah, that's not his role.
Like Jalen Ramsey who could be shadowing. Like,
exactly.
This defense, I'm assuming, we'll see a lot more of Jalen Ramsey, Javon Holland, those guys moving around to go make plays on playmakers rather than just having Kader Kohu sit on CeeDee Lamb for an entire half and just get absolutely torched. Like, I think that just because these players played way below expectations does not mean that they're necessarily bad football players, and I think that there's still really good football left in Kader Kohu. So he's somebody I think could see a role. I would still go out and bring in one more guy. Every day that passes, this is my wild card. Every day that passes and L'Jarius Sneed is not on another team, I know Chris Grier is like absolutely losing his mind at the idea of bringing him. Like, I'm not necessarily the biggest L'Jarius Sneed, like, as far as like the money goes as a fit for the Dolphins, but as a football player, that's an awesome player. And seeing the potential of him on this team, I know Chris Grier gets excited about that. And I think that is just my big one wild card move. If Miami's going to make a splash, my guess is it would be him.
100%. I agree. I think that'd be the one splash move. I don't think we're in the position to make a splash move, like you said, financially, but it wouldn't be a Chris Grier offseason without that splash move that kind of comes out of nowhere. And you've seen minor reports come out about the Dolphins checking in on L'Jarius Sneed. With that being said, we're about to wrap it up here. Let's go with our random Dolphin for this episode. Tyler, who do you got?
Random Dolphin for this episode.
Putting you on the spot here.
I didn't even think about it this past time. You know what? We're talking about offensive guards. We're talking about, needing to bring back the unicorns, needing to bring back an old offensive line of the past and have guys produce. My guy's Jermon Bushrod. That's my
Okay, no, never mind. That's not what I thought was coming out.
Yeah, no, I have no clue how that name got into my head, but I just started sorting through, and the first guy I thought of was Jermon Bushrod. So, yeah, bringing back one of the unicorns, former guard. Let's bring back some of that look and have a really good offensive line this season.
In honor of it's so hard to pick, and actually this can be a segment that we do too. We'll do it right after because I would say I think it's my favorite free agent signing, but it's hard to choose so far. In honor of Jonnu Smith, shout out to Charles Clay for those couple incredible seasons on the Dolphins at tight end. That's my random. He's not even really that random because he's pretty good. Like, he was actually decent, but I feel like he still didn't play long enough. So big play Clay, I'll give him as a random Dolphin. But actually, that's a great segment to do as we end this episode here. What would be your favorite free agent signing thus far?
Jordan Brooks. I mean, there's no question about it at this point. I think that all the best teams in the NFL right now have linebackers that you fear, like I said, and he just has the potential to be that guy. It's that simple for me. It's Jordan Brooks.
Fair. So I was going to say, Chris Grier's actually put us in a position where, dude, Aaron Brewer could completely outplay his contract. Shaq Barrett, Jordan Poyer, those are all guys. I'll say Jonnu Smith just because I said Charles Clay, and I just think he can have an opportunity to be really good in this system. But when I thought about it, I was like, who's my favorite free agent signing thus far? Or who's my favorite kind of value free agent? And like Chris Grier has in the past, like Deshaun Elliott and David Long last year, there's a pretty good amount of options. But obviously Jordan Brooks is kind of the belle of the ball for us right now.
Yeah, that's pretty much the guy. I think he'll probably be one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid free agent that we end up just getting in total. He's probably the big move, and I really do think that he's going to be worth way more than what that contract looks like, just because I think that there's a ceiling there that has not been necessarily put into place just because of the fact that I never really think he's gotten a chance to play Mike Backer. I think that he can be a really good
he's been stuck
player.
behind Bobby Wagner, so this is how that goes.
So I think there's a real chance that a lot of these guys are, really good football players and can play above their pay grade. And if you add in a few more guys who are like that, have a solid draft, all of a sudden you're looking at a roster that's a lot more well-rounded than it was last year, and maybe you're competing for playoff wins.
100%. And with that, we'll leave you there. Thank you guys so much for listening, watching, liking, subscribing, following, all that stuff. We appreciate it. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back soon with more free agent stuff. And then after that, it's where we get into our draft bag and we start talking about the NFL draft. So thank you guys so much for watching and all that stuff, and we'll see you next time.